I'm Captain Logan.
I'm the Geoff.
And today we're bringing you part 5 in our series of Harry Potter discussions. Today we're going to be talking about Harry Potter and... and I gotta tell you, I think this is my favorite of them.
So far, this is the best of the movies.
Oh, I'm surprised that you're agreeing with me on that. Okay, cool.
Just as an overall package, it does everything it does very, very well. And it does everything you could possibly want it to. If there's a way I can say that without disparaging like the first couple of movies, I will say this is the best of them up to this point, with hands down.
Yeah, I mean, when I say I guess I just mean it's my favorite of them. I mean, like, because I'm still so extremely impressed with Columbus, with the first one, even, you know, getting it off the ground in such a fantastic way, and but this one is as competent at that, and has my favorite of the stories. I think that it's really competent storytelling, and it's really, really well paced. And, you know, we were talking a lot about pacing problems with 3 and 4. This one doesn't have that. It knows just what it's doing, and importantly, you know, it's a new director, and the guy doesn't feel like he hasn't done it before. It's like he comes right in and just takes over and seems to know just what he's doing, and he's also not like intrusive, like we were talking about with especially 3. Yeah,
there's no sense of, hey, new director, which is very gratifying.
And he has
shows maturity.
He has the best sense of this is part of a whole.
Yes, and very glad they kept him for the 6th and the 7th for that reason. Perhaps as more than anybody other than maybe Chris Columbus himself is the one who gets the entirety of the arc and understands it. Now, it must be admitted that at this point, just about all the books have been written.
Yeah.
I can't remember whether the 7th book had in fact come out in print yet when the 5th movie came out, but if it hadn't, it was close. Certainly the 6th was out and in print, and J.K. knew enough about the 7th to be able to tell him everything that he could possibly want to know.
Yeah, Yates might have even gotten a chance to read a manuscript even before it was published. Who knows?
Yeah. Or had all the conversations he could possibly want, because the film production people were in on the process and in on information that she did not reveal to anyone else, because those would be things that they would need to know in order to make all the movies coherent.
So, since you know the books really well, and this is the place where I stopped reading them, I haven't read 5, what doesn't this one do, and is there anything left out that makes it clunky like 3 and 4 kind of were in places?
There are things left out, of course. Most of what's left out, or what's condensed in this one, happen to have been the parts of the book that hurt the most to read for me. I found the 5th book to be a painful one, just to read, just to live through, because Harry's 5th year is a really horrible year for him. And most of the omission in the film that I noticed being gone seems to fall into the category of actually ameliorating that some, and they skipped over some of the worst of the pain that he goes through in the 5th year, in his various dealings with Umbridge and the various ways she, works on making his life miserable beyond just the handwriting torture thing,
which is super creepy and really well handled.
Yeah, well handled, yes.
I love the juxtaposition, by the way, when the first time that she does that with Harry up her office, of all these like creepy cat pictures. I mean plates, and of course it's the wizard world, so even the plates have to have pictures that move on them. And then you've got Harry there in this like uncomfortably chipper room, I think is the best way I could put it. And then he's writing
sickly sweet.
And then he's writing "I will not tell lies" on his hand.
Yeah, that was brilliant. And that is from the book. But Umbridge as a character is brilliantly written in the first place, and brilliantly portrayed by Imelda Staunton. They got her exactly right in this movie. and actually added to her. She goes a little farther in the movie in some ways than she does in the book.
Oh wow, really?
And that, especially if you've got the full version of the movie including the deleted scenes, and those additions confirm and complete the character rather than being just stuff that get tacked on to a character, as so often happens.
That's great.
Movies of things.
That's great, because that's the first time in these discussions that we've seen something that you've said, yay, they added it, not, oh, was that really necessary, or well, I guess it was okay, but I didn't really see the point of it.
It may be the first time I've ever seen that done ever in any movie whatsoever.
I still personally say there's stuff that was added to Watchmen that I liked, but whatever. I'll
have to watch that again.
But that's just me. But anyway, I think she's fantastic. She is such a compelling villain, and one thing I like too is that her motivations make a lot of sense, and Fudge really is the one that's making all this possible. And his reasons are simply he doesn't want to believe Voldemort's back, and he has the power to pretend that he's not, and so basically damn the consequences, right?
This is what happens when you give power to somebody who does not feel himself obligated to reality.
Yeah.
And Fudge's character in this is also very convincing and very convincingly played, and you get the feeling that this could really happen in the real world if a politician had the kind of power that the Minister of Magic does in this universe, that their own, even the stupidest, bizarrest things that cross their minds can magnify into something that has an effect over the entire nation and can resonate with itself to create these really nightmarish scenarios. I love our first look in the Ministry of Magic, and we get to see this gigantic wall-sized portrait of Cornelius Fudge, looking determined and leaderly, and you just almost want to, just almost are looking for a red swastika banner on either side of him, and it's got that kind of megalomaniac, huge grandeur to it.
And I like that he's not two-dimensional, though. You really get the sense that it's just that he has a vision for what he wants the world to be, and that's really, a lot of the scariest world leaders have had good intentions, or thought they had good intentions, right? And so you got this guy who he likes the wizarding world. He wants it to be a nice, happy, peaceful place, but he doesn't know how to make it that. And so he goes against what's right in front of his face, and he makes it scarier. It's the political intrigue that really gets me in this movie.
And stomping on the people around him who are trying to tell him the truth is his response to that. And it's of course, it's an awful response, but he makes it convincingly. And his reaction at the very end of the film, when he finally is forced to see that Voldemort is indeed back in action and has come out swinging. Even that little reaction we get from him shows that he really is a real human with a lot of power and with some messed up wrong ideas in his head, and doing with them what a person with some messed up ideas and a lot of power would do.
Doing this story in so many books and by extension so many movies gives Rowling the chance to make it not just about there's a scary monster guy and he's got followers, So you get this whole story where the stakes feel almost as big as they possibly could, in a way, because you haven't had a Voldemort takeover yet, but you've got but you've got like, we're afraid we're going to lose society, and we're seeing society crumble. We're seeing what makes this place a good place to live, and what makes what makes people love it. There's some real social commentary going on, where the idea of Voldemort is as destructive as he is.
Exactly.
And so when even the possibility that he's come back starts destroying Hogwarts, which I think is kind of this story's way of giving us a look at the whole wizarding world. I think that Hogwarts really stands for why this is a cool place, and why we should want to like it, and maybe even want to live there.
Yeah, it is a microcosm of its world.
Yeah, thank you. It's so scary.
A nice dimension to this is the fact that in Volume 5 of the arc, in a lot of ways, the main antagonist Harry has to deal with not only is not Voldemort, but in fact is an organization that would be and will be, or at least will want to see itself as against Voldemort once they finally realizes it. Fudge is not an extension of Voldemort. Fudge is not a Death Eater. Fudge and his crowd are not themselves a part of Voldemort and his crew, and yet they are very much Harry's enemies for this entire book until the last couple of pages,
and are kind of accidentally facilitating the coming of Voldemort. I think you could go that far, right?
And Voldemort really is able to use them for his purpose,
right?
In spite of themselves. That angle is played a little straighter in the book than in the movie.
Well, I still felt like I was getting pieces of it, though. I mean, I felt like it was perhaps in the background, but it was there. I mean, like, wouldn't one of the first things Voldemort would want be to get rid of Dumbledore, and that's what Uxbridge wants, right?
She's marginalize Dumbledore, marginalize Harry, marginalize anybody who actually would stand up to him, and then he can manifest himself when there will be no opposition. It's a great strategy. Yeah, it's made more explicit in the book, but it's clear in the film now that he's really making use of this twisted, crazy political climate to achieve his ends. And you got to admit, in all fairness, Voldemort has some experience, because he's done a round of this before. Voldemort was taking over the world before Harry was born, and so a lot of the things that are happening.
Great line. I've been taking over the world since before you were born.
I think that actually is a line. I think that is in something.
All right, cool.
But not in this franchise. I've seen that somewhere. But Voldemort has some experience with taking over the world, and as expected, he has a pretty shrewd idea of how to go about it. I think a large part of his menace is so effective because we know...
That's what's on his resume, have taken over the world.
We know that what he's trying to do really would work. And he really would have gotten away with it if it weren't for those meddling kids.
That's a great point.
We see plenty of fantasy fiction where the evil plot really, if you stop and think about it a little bit, does not make much sense, or would not actually accomplish what the bad guys hope of it. Here,
it's written intentionally easy to beat.
Yeah.
Because it's got to be beat.
It's extremely plausible.
Yeah. And what I love about this is that those meddling kids feel more like just meddling kids. When Harry Potter starts really training them, I buy all of that. I really buy all of those kids becoming really powerful wizards and becoming a threat in an army. And I mean, they've got a little piece of parchment that says Dumbledore's army, but like they're a threat. They're turning into something really powerful. And Harry Potter gets to finally come into his own as a leader.
Yes.
In the midst of being really angry and really terrified, and it all makes sense that that's coming together.
In the midst of being tortured in a lot of ways, not the least of which is the fact that Voldemort is living in his skull.
Yeah.
Almost in a literal sense.
And I think that they do a good job of making that present throughout the film. That he's in his skull, and
they have this nice little device of Harry's neck popping twist that we first see when in his hallucination of Voldemort on platform 9¾ that is kind of a signal that Voldemort's semi-possession of Harry's mind is operative here.
Do you find yourself wondering what that's supposed to be symbolic of? Because that can't be...
It took me a long time to figure out what I think I figured out.
Okay, because that can't be an arbitrary location. I mean, he's on the platform. That's got to be symbolic of something.
Yeah. Well, he's vulnerable. He's outside the Order of the Phoenix. He's out in public. He's accessible in a way that he hasn't been so far in the story. I mean, at his home, there's all sorts of spells around his home that Dumbledore set up at the Dursleys' house. The Order of the Phoenix is heavily protected and is friendly territory. On the platform, for the first time in this story at least, Harry is, well, as we get it in the movie at least, Harry is outside of protection. He's practically naked. If someone wanted to attack him there, that'd have been an awful good place to choose.
Okay, sure.
It's not the first time I spoke incorrectly. Probably that scene where he's out on the playground and jabbing with Dudley in the very, very introduction of the film.
Right.
But
where a person sees Dementors who somehow wasn't actually in the place where where the Dementors were. That's definitely a
penalty
problem.
to the filmmakers. This scene in the book happens out on the street, so it made sense in the book for Arabella Figg to have been looking out her window watching Harry, as in fact he was on duty.
Here they put it in a random tunnel thing that we've kept going, what even is that? And she walks up, and right after the whole thing has happened, wasn't in the tunnel thing, was just behind it, and wasn't like peeking around or anything. As far as we can tell, she wasn't even witness to it, but knew there were Dementors there, and then in the courtroom explains everything that happened.
So when the filmmakers chose to place that confrontation in this tunnel thing, they goofed up on that. The rest of the film proceeds as if it had happened as it should, because putting it in the tunnel was their idea. It was not.
Yeah, well,
that was something they did. But you can't win them all. They'd got an awful lot of stuff right in this film. So
yeah, absolutely.
We shouldn't be too harsh.
And now that we're in criticisms, we probably should also talk about the return of Angry Dumbledore, because because Angry Dumbledore is definitely present. But what I find myself scratching my head about is that he doesn't stay that way.
No. And again, J.K. Rowling is careful to describe Dumbledore as serene and untroubled in most of his appearances in the books. Any kind of outburst of emotion from him is extremely rare. There's exactly one of them in book 4, which is the first, and this one moment at the denouement of the 5th story where we actually get to see some of the raw anger and power in him. And Harry remarks on how this is the first time he's ever had a glimpse of why anyone would have been afraid of him. But Dumbledore seems petulant in arguing with Umbridge at the point where Professor Trelawney is being fired. And then he snaps at the students who are standing by watching on his way out the door. This is inconsistent with Dumbledore's character. And yet, later on, when Dumbledore's army has been broken up by Umbridge and the goons, and Malfoy and his goons, in that scene we have Dumbledore calm and in control of himself, as we'd have wanted to see him.
And naturally, of course, that makes him in that scene really awesome. When he when the Phoenix pops up and he disappears, and you're like, well, where was that Dumbledore in the other scenes? And the problem with it is that it almost comes off like he's only acting that way because he has a plan.
Yeah.
But in the movies prior to 4, you get the sense that Dumbledore kind of always has a plan.
Yeah.
So
plans within plans often enough.
And I know we talked about this before, but even when the actor changed, he wasn't like that in 3. Then 4, he starts really getting angry at weird things, and then you get here, and he's inconsistently that way.
Yeah.
It's just hard to get a real good beat on him. I'm
not sure what point they're trying to make, if they're trying to make a point with that, but that's a distortion of the character from the novel that is of the kind that that irritates me when I watch a movie. Particularly that will mess with people's personalities because we don't think who they are in the source material is adequate to move the story.
And sometimes I think maybe it's even just a case of easy drama, where it's just we need to see people. It's like I think maybe the filmmakers unfortunately sometimes feel like, and I say filmmakers because you got different directors doing it. I because this isn't the same guy who directed 4, so I'm a little bit perplexed that that's there. So really, I think a lot of it might just be he's afraid that the character wouldn't be relatable to people because anyone in that situation would get angry.
Yeah.
But he's not anyone. Dumbledore is an exceptional person.
That's what makes Dumbledore Dumbledore. That's one of the things that's not a minor quirk of his personality. It's central to who he is, and it is a plot point. And you don't, at least I don't like to see filmmakers tampering with these issues of a person's character, especially when it doesn't seem like there's a good reason to. I defy anyone to read the corresponding scene in the book and tell me how the film would have been a lot worse, or the character of Dumbledore would have been less plausible, less interesting, less watchable, if they had written him the way Rowling did.
And may I suggest that even more perplexing is that while you've got inconsistent, somewhat angry Dumbledore, certainly not like 4, but there, and we're really kind of quibbling about a single scene. Let's be fair, but it's still there, and it's kind of problematic. In the same movie that's doing that, that's making someone surprisingly angry when they probably shouldn't be, you've also got it making Harry a little bit less angry than at least you described to me from the way he was in the book, and I thought that was handled really, really well. Because I felt like Harry was going through a really hard time. I felt like he was getting... I felt like he was getting angry, and he was letting his anger get the better at him without him having to run around and really shout at people and scream a lot and that sort of thing.
Which he does in the book.
Yeah, and you told me that, and I was kind of glad that they left that out of the film because I didn't feel like I needed it. The scene with as far as they dial it back. And I wonder how much of that was Ratcliffe, to be honest with you. But the way they dial it back,
it's hard to imagine Ratcliffe actually playing Harry the way I read him in the book.
I'm not saying he's incapable of it, but I wonder if that was partially his idea, because I like that that like even as dialed back as that is, when he has that moment with Sirius Black where he says, "I'm angry all the time and I'm afraid I'm going bad," I still buy that scene.
Yes.
I didn't need him screaming at people. I still bought it, and I still think that there is
I'm awfully glad they put that there.
Broad dimension to the acting.
Yeah, I'm glad
well, it may have been too subtle without it, but I did believe it.
Yes. Now, Harry does a lot of shouting in the book and is irrationally angry in a lot of the book. And
well, I'm sure that's supposed to be because Voldemort's in his head. And,
we later find out just how much of that is because he's got this persistent presence, and whatever emotions Voldemort has at a moment are always trying to break into him. You know, when he has so many more visions of Voldemort than just the one in the book, and he tunes in at Voldemort's emotions more readily than what he sees or what he says or what he thinks. So every time Voldemort's happy about something, Harry feels happy for no reason. Every time Voldemort's angry, Harry feels angry for no reason, and he starts to notice this through the book, that his emotions seem really, really weirdly unconnected with what's actually happening to him, because they're not his emotions.
I think perhaps the way that they simplified it in the movie was okay. I think it was perhaps necessary for a film.
I don't blame them for doing that, and it probably made the film a more endurable thing, at least for me.
Well, and I found it really enjoyable. I'm going to go as far as to say I found it thrilling. I think that the duel at the end between Voldemort and Dumbledore is just a thrilling scene. It's the kind of action I want to see in a movie like this, because it's not fun just because it's two guys shooting each other with wands, and so it's an action scene. It's fun because there's so much imagination behind it.
Yes. This is the duel between two powerful wizards that I've been waiting for my whole life. I mean, you watch fantasy movies of any kind, and
it's really just two guys with sticks
pointed
at each other.
And they say zappy zappies, zappy zappy, fly backwards. Here, we have the glass shards. That Dumbledore turns them to sand. There's a big ball of water. There's the flaming snakehead. There's lots of different things that they're doing to each other instead of just blast, 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 which to me is basically a gun duel except with wands.
Yeah.
And with different visual effects.
And I think part of what makes it so fun to watch and so exciting is also because of the location. Yeah. Because, I mean, the black brick and everything, that's such a cool place to set up your big climactic fight. And may I say that we complained in both 3 and 4 about some problems with anticlimacticness toward the end of your movie. You don't have that here, man. The climax is the climax, and you're reeling after it. I don't mean to oversell this, but I really, really enjoy the ending of this film.
It is very, very
so much
well done.
fun.
This is the 5th book is the first one in this concluding sequence of the battle, and then the second battle at the Ministry, or the first time in reading the books that I ever got a sense from the books that the author is really thinking about how this is going to play out visually, and is writing with the deliberate intention of making sure that this is something that's going to transfer into a really awesome scene on screen. I don't know that she's never done that, had not done that before, but this was the first time when I was reading, I thought, wow, she is thinking carefully about this. She's really paying attention to this aspect of it.
And I bet in the movie that probably escalated your enjoyment of it too, because you thought that while you were reading it, this seems like maybe she's writing for screen here, and then the screen portrayed it the way you saw it in the book, at least to a degree, right?
Yeah, and in my own personal experience, it doesn't always happen that way when you see something and you think, this is being sculpted so as to transfer well to yet another medium. I mean, I'm already really sick of kids' movies with scenes that scream to me, this is going to be in the video game we're about to put out.
Yeah, sure.
That kicks me right out of so many stories. But this was an example of how that actually helped. And that's cool. So many cool things in this film. There is there's a scene with Umbridge in the forest when Harry and Hermione have led her out there in kind of a
you want to talk
grasping
about
at straws. That there is actually a deletion from the scene here that I much wish that they had left in for the sake of showing us who this Umbridge character really is. When she captured them all after breaking up Dumbledore's army, we already see her preparing to use the Cruciatus curse, one of the 3 unforgivable curses, because using any of them on another human is punishable by a life sentence.
And that's where she puts down the picture of Fudge on the table.
She turns Fudge's picture down onto the desk, and says, what Cornelius doesn't know won't hurt him. This is also where she kind of implies, and where we learn probably more clearly in the book, that she, in fact, was behind the Dementor attack at the beginning of the story that almost succeeded in getting Harry expelled from school.
Which I agree could have been clearer, but I think that you can still surmise that.
Yeah. The subtlety is good, but that's the scene. Well, in the woods, in the deleted scene, when Umbridge realizes that Harry and Hermione have basically been stringing her along out here, and she says, I really hate children. The deleted scene is kind of an extension of that brief speech, and she talks some about how she's for order and doing what must be done to uphold authority and respect for order, and if no one else will do what needs to be done, then she'll be the one who will do what needs to be done. And she's brandishing her wand, and she's getting it ready, and turning towards Harry and Hermione there, and she does not quite get the words out, but you gotta 60-40 guess that the next words she's going to say are Avada Kedavra. She's going to murder them in the woods because she has persuaded herself, and she actually does say in the deleted scene, because the ends justify the means.
And she's clearly that kind of thinker anyway.
Yeah.
That didn't have to be spelled out, but that's okay.
I love them making that point about her.
Let me ask you a question.
About that kind of thinking.
So that couldn't have been, and I'm not seeing that deleted scene, but the way you described it, it can't be more than 3-4 minutes long.
No, it's maybe 45 seconds.
So clearly wasn't cut for time.
No,
it would not have ruined the pacing. It's obviously not a pacing thing. It's a big. No. It's kind of a plot thing, and I don't think that the movie doesn't work without it. But I wonder why it's missing. No. And is it a violence thing? Is it they're not that what she does is violent, but are they just afraid that they've taken her even too far? Because you made the case that the movie actually takes her even further in a she's willing to do violence direction than it did in the book, and maybe at the last minute Yates decided that he had taken that character even further than he should have, unless that's in the book.
That isn't. I think that is not actually in the book, or at least not in that way exactly.
I wonder if he was afraid he was just taking too many liberties by leaving that there.
Yeah, it may be a second guessing thing, or it may just be keeping it clean for the kids kind of edit. I don't know exactly why they chose to do that.
I'm with you though. It's worthy of the film. I wish it was there.
Yeah. But 45 seconds longer for that seems like a good trade-off to me. But again, and that's yet one more moment of Imelda Staunton just being brilliant.
Yeah. And may I say, by the way, that this film doesn't have pacing problems at all. It's wonderfully fluid.
Yes, you get from each scene to the next very smoothly, and there are no holes, there are no deserts in the action in this movie.
This guy's got great command of storytelling in this medium. He knows just what to do.
He clearly has got his shoes on.
I so wish he'd made 4.
Yes.
And again, I liked a lot of things about 4, but I really wish he'd made 4.
We would have liked even more things about 4 had it been him, I think.
I think so too. Anything else we didn't touch on? I think we've talked about Harry and Dumbledore's characters pretty well. There's not as much for the other two to do in this one.
There really isn't. Although the one thing that the biggest function they do seem to serve, apart from some nice moments towards the end when they're actually battling and fighting, first Umbridge and then the Death Eaters in the Ministry, we see them trying hard to be friends to Harry throughout this film.
Mm-hmm.
And most of the times they're doing that, we see Harry push them away, sometimes rather nastily.
Right.
That is true to the source. That is one of the things about the book that always kind of annoyed me at first when I read it, and still bothered me to see Harry be so unkind to the people who are trying very hard to be supportive and helpful to him, and who have been his friends for years, and who are going to stay his friends.
And from a position of point of view in a narrative, it's a lot
harder.
Glad
they toned that down in the film.
Yeah, and it's a lot harder to read that in a book because it's third person limited from the perspective of that character. So not only he's in every scene and it's all from his perspective. So not only do you have to see him do that, but you've also got to be in his head while he does it, and that probably makes it harder to read. Not that I've read the book,
unpleasant place to be.
But that's an unpleasant place to be.
And we finally learned it's because Harry really is kind of channeling Voldemort's emotions. And think about what it must be like to live inside Voldemort's head.
Absolutely, yeah.
A very unpleasant place to be, actually. A lot of hatred, a lot of bitter, a lot of resentment. A lot of just plain evil. And it's not fun to be evil. So kids, if you're watching this at home, don't be evil. Evil is bad.
Speaking of the mind thing, of him getting in his head, I love Snape in this movie.
Oh,
and
yes.
I'm really glad that they didn't chop that up a bunch. I mean, like you get 2 whole scenes of Snape trying to teach Harry how to block Voldemort out of his brain, which I think is really sufficient, because you really get the feeling that they're spending a lot. Not just Harry saying we've been at this for hours, but you get the sense that they've been working on this a lot, and it's also neat to see Snape as Harry Potter's ally. What would that be like? He doesn't like Harry Potter. He doesn't like that family. What's it like when he chooses to be his ally? I found all that fascinating, and he's still very, very true to his character. But not just comedic. Like there's some great, because Snape usually I'm laughing at. I mean he's scary, but I'm kind of laughing at him. Here, some of the best drama comes from Snape in those scenes.
Yeah. 10 points to Gryffindor for Alan Rickman. I guess that'd be to Slytherin.
To Slytherin. What are you talking about?
But yeah, he does these scenes marvelously. I kind of wish that they had not been quite so stingy with the memory, particularly when Harry manages to bust through and see some of Snape's memory. I sort of wish that scene had been a little bit less rushed and a little more coherent.
Yeah, but having not read the book, it told me a lot. I like in a very short period of time.
It does.
It tells you why Snape didn't like Harry's father, and
you get to see that childhood rivalry,
and you get to see him be bullied, which is not necessarily what you would expect. In retrospect, is maybe somewhat of a cliche, but
yeah, just to see young Snape and just a window into young little Snape's world, and then schoolboy Snape's life.
Yeah, he bullies people because he was bullied. Maybe you expect that after the fact, but maybe the issue is the bully that it turned out to be is not who you would have expected, because you get the sense up to this point, at least just watching the movies, that that James Potter could do no wrong.
Right, and this was Harry's first, and Harry is brought face to face for the first time with the fact that his father just not only was a flawed human being, but in fact had a really pretty nasty streak.
Which works wonderfully thematically with the movie when we get that line about from Black that people are not just good or bad, they have good and bad in them, and then he has to see that in his father while working with that with himself. And what I love about that too is that it's not just Voldemort is getting in his head, so he's being so he's got bad things. He still has that in him because we know that his father did. That all works together wonderfully thematically.
Harry has to face in this film and in this book and this part of the story that while Voldemort and his crowd sure are heck of a evil, they are not the only evil in the world. They are not the fountainhead of all the badness. That evil, that cruelty, that meanness, that harshness and suffering are still a part of life. And that Voldemort and his crowd, while a very visible manifestation of what that can do, are not the be-all and end-all of suffering in the world. And I like the way they got that in. What we didn't get to see in the flashback in Snape's memory is Snape's relationship with Harry's mother.
Okay, what's that about?
Which is going to become more and more important as we get to the 6th, and especially in the 7th film.
See, I've forgotten because I've only seen those once and I didn't read the books. But were they an item, or something like that?
Well, Snape and Harry's mother knew each other before they went to school.
Okay.
And through school, and they actually have their relationship actually has an arc before Harry's mother and Potter Sr. get together, and that is a major story element. And that turns out to have a lot to do with who Snape really is, and as we come to learn that, and it's a wonderful thing that she does, that the author does, I think, in giving even Snape, who we first meet as this black hat cowboy, 100% mean, 100% evil, and he turns out to be one of the most human characters in the story.
He starts out as somebody that you wonder if he even has a backstory.
Yeah. You know, he does not at first seem like he would need one.
Yeah, sure.
You know, one day, an eclipsed sun fell on molding garbage, and up from that sprouted the evil Snape. And that's not true. Voldemort himself has a backstory, and we're going to learn more of that as we get on in the series. But the fact that Rowling #1 makes an effort to show us that these people we see as such villains come from somewhere.
Are that way for a reason.
And yet at the same time does not allow that fact to be an excusing thing for evil.
Great.
She does not give us the origin of Snape and the origin of Voldemort as a way of saying, see, everyone's just people, and you only hate people because you don't understand them well enough, and they seem evil, it's just because you don't know where they've been. Still in this story, evil is still evil, good is still good, morality is still real, and people, both good and evil, really are people.
I think it's also important to point out that Sirius Black makes the point that when he says, and I keep going back to this scene, but I think it's really important thematically. I think if it wasn't there, the movie wouldn't be what it is. That he not only says people have good and bad in them, but he says it's their choice which one to act on.
The part you choose to act on is what matters.
And so Rowling's not saying that the evil characters in her story are evil because of what happened to them. They had no choice but to be that way. They made a choice,
and that's good to see.
Well, because that's real. That's
the truth.
That's the truth, exactly.
And not every movie tells us that.
Well, that's what I had. Did you have any other notes that we didn't touch on?
A compression that I really, really liked. Don't usually like the compression that movies have to do. I really liked the sequence after the battle in the Ministry of the newspaper headlines.
Oh, yeah.
As a way of wrapping up about a chapter and a half of exposition in the book, really quite quickly and effectively. And I thought that was a neat way to go about that. And points to whoever thought of that.
Of like where Umbridge went and what happened to get the school back together.
Fudge resigning,
right.
Which he does.
Does he not appear after this?
In the books, he appears in the first chapter of Book 6. Because the new minister keeps him around for certain purposes.
Oh,
I don't remember whether we see him in the 6th movie or not.
Okay, well, I guess
we'll find out.
Find out when we get there.
A well-made film.
Oh yeah, fantastic. I have seen it maybe now 3 or 4 times, and again, not the biggest giant Harry Potter fan, but I can't get enough of this movie for some reason. I don't know if it's just the atmosphere. Well, I mean, we talked about all the things we liked about it, but I mean, like, you know, I like a lot of stuff with the other ones, but this one, just something about the atmosphere, I really enjoy sitting down and watching it.
It's a visual treat. It's a wonderful human journey, and it's in many ways the heart of the narrative for Harry.
Makes sense, because it's kind of in the middle.
Yeah.
I mean, well, okay, it's not, but I guess for the movies it sort of is, because there's another one, but...
Yeah. Well, it's the 57% mark.
Well, everybody, thanks a lot for watching this edition of Harry Potter Discussions. We will come back to you very soon with Book 6, I guess Movie 6, Harry Potter and...
The Half-Blood Prince.
I'm Captain Logan.
And I'm the Geoff.
And we'll see you next time.
Bye.